Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. I'm your host, Ben Crossman. Everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope that you are having a lovely day. So today on the program, we have a full hour of computer and technology news. Definitely want to get that in there because last couple days we've had some great guests, and we definitely appreciate that. But we always want to keep up to date on computer and technology news. So with that being said, a lot of great stories, and if you want to find out more, be sure to head on over to computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including the show notes. It will have links, it will have the video, it will have the archives, the podcast, all that kind of thing. And on top of that, while you're there, be sure to check out of course, the live video portion, which can be found at twitch.tv/computeramerica. But we also have an entire section dedicated to a lot of different kind of content, and one that I really want to draw attention to are some of the recent reviews that we posted. We should probably work on spacing them out a bit better, but we just put up, I think, about 5 or 6 new reviews over at Computer America. So really the goal of those is not, to really influence your decision to buy anything or something like that. It's for those of you who maybe already are looking at those products and you would like, kind of like a teardown, an unboxing, and, just kind of a demonstration of how these things work. And if they go together and everything goes smoothly, then hey, our reviews are definitely the ones to check out. So everyone, go out there, check that out, and again, computeramerica.com. So with that being said, I think that's about all. I should probably mention a couple of things before we go on to computer and technology news. With, of course, the basic being Computer America will be off this upcoming week from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You heard that right? 3 separate days. I know, it's crazy. But yeah, so we take off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of the Thanksgiving week. So Monday and Tuesday regular. And then past that into December, that's our longest break of the year. And we'll be playing Best of Computer America, so don't worry. We'll pick some of our favorite episodes, and of course yours too. And we'll be playing those as time goes by, but we'll be off the air starting, I think, like the 20th will be our last day, and then all the way until I think like January 2nd is when we come back. But then here's the thing about all that is that when it comes to Computer America and January 2nd, the following week we have this weird CES thing going on where it's not weird. I mean, it's CES. It's the largest consumer electronics show in the country, and it happens in very, very early January. So we'll be out on the floor interviewing people and uploading content to YouTube and maybe short clips to where we kind of put out podcasts, but we will not be doing the live radio show as per se. And then after that, we'll be back to normal Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. Just the second, kind of the second half of December and the first half of January are going to get really hectic because we'll be very busy behind the scenes. So don't worry, we'll be back. But okay, so all that being said, everyone, let's go ahead, just jump right into computer and technology news. We have a lot of different things to talk about, and we can go ahead and get started. So here we go. So I think for our first story, we are going to talk about, well, there's a couple of heavy ones out there. Heavy stories, they have heavy implications, and we should probably tackle those while we're fresh and we are ready for the show. I know it's the end of the workday for a lot of you folks, so, hey, bear with me. But let's go ahead and talk about Ring. Ring Doorbell, to be more specific. So Ring Doorbell is property of, let's see, who? I think it was Amazon. Yeah. So Amazon recently purchased them, and they're using the Ring, kind of the Ring ecosystem to build out their smart home devices. Which, hey, I remember having Ring on the show before they before they got really, really big. We talked to the creator. It was great, and I will say this, even though I know that he's listening, I will say this, that what Ring did right, like Ring wasn't the first one out there to make a smart doorbell or essentially put a webcam into your doorbell. They weren't the first, but what they had going for them, and I can certainly applaud this, is that they had a fantastic marketing team who just completely hit up the entire country. I've never seen anything like it, and they really took off. And that really shows, kind of the difference for everyone out there. The difference between an idea and, something truly new is that you can have the best idea in the world, but if no one's ever heard of it and no one is ever going to hear about it, then hey, that's a problem. But the creator definitely put in the footwork and, made Ring what it is. And then it was purchased by Amazon. Now, all this put together, that's why this article is so important, is because now we're going to be talking about this footage, all this footage that is collected from people's doorbells and peepholes and so on and so forth. Essentially, everyone that comes in and out of your home is to some extent monitored. And you think that, hey, as the homeowner, that's my right, it's my property, and it's going to be all okay. Until you read this one. And this is why maybe it's best to learn how to set up your own cloud and have your video stored only on your home devices and home hard drives as opposed to Amazon's cloud. So this is from the Washington Post and Mr. Drew Harrell, saying that police officers who download videos captured by homeowners' Ring doorbells can keep them forever and share them with whomever they like without providing evidence of a crime. And that is what the Amazon-owned firm told lawmakers this month, saying that more than 600 police officers, 600 police forces, so that's not even officers, there could be multiple police officers who are following up on crimes and, needing those kinds of, needing those doorbell videos. But essentially, they're saying that 600 police forces across the country have entered into partnership with the camera giant, allowing them to quickly request and download video recorded by Ring's motion detector, detecting internet-connected cameras inside and around Americans' homes. So a couple of things. That partnership, that has to do with these law enforcement agencies essentially working with the company, not even with the individuals who installed the doorbells and purchased the doorbells and have them monitoring their home, but it has to do with kind of like an expedited process that happens for, getting a subpoena and then getting the video footage and that kind of thing. And they want them to fast track it because obviously if a crime is committed, you don't want to wait days for footage. It would be much, 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 much more helpful if you only had to wait minutes for the footage, or, even hours would still be very, very helpful. So the company said that the videos can be a critical tool in helping law enforcement investigate crimes such as trespassing, burglary, and package theft, and that homeowners are free to decline the request. So there you go. That's, who knows for how long though, but for now they're free to decline them. They say that, but some lawmakers and privacy advocates say that the system could empower more widespread police surveillance, fuel racial profiling, and spark new neighborhood fears. And really, that's the thing, is that if you and just a couple of those points is like police surveillance, because I feel like we're kind of past the point about caring too much about public spaces, and especially, potentially targets for terrorism or any national security targets or things like that. Like if you go into Times Square, that there's probably thousands and thousands of cameras pointed at every angle in Times Square. Because they need to know. They need to know that information. If something happens to such a high risk area, they need to be able to act on the information immediately. But the difference is that, you kind of expect that for subway systems, public transit. You expect that for, major places, maybe landmarks and whatnot. But do you expect that in every single neighborhood in the country? And do the people who install these things really foresee that they are installing a camera not for them, which is what I would honestly hope that they're doing, that they're installing a camera so that they can feel more secure in their property? Instead, they're installing cameras for police to then ask for the video footage. And of course, that video footage, if it's stored in the cloud, and even if you deny the request, they can get a subpoena, and then that subpoena can be issued to Ring, who, because the video is stored on Amazon's web servers, they would of course comply with law enforcement. They've mentioned they do this all the time. It happens a lot. It happens more often than you think. It happens in situations where even if there's no direct evidence of crime, or they don't know exactly who, they'd rather be what they think is safe than sorry. They'd get all the evidence that they could, and even if your Ring doorbell doesn't actually have any evidence, they still want to see any kind of motion alert or people coming in and out or things like that. So, with that being said, following reports that Ring's police partnerships in the Washington Post and other outlets, Senator Ed Markey is asking Amazon for details about how it protected the data and civil liberties of people caught on camera. And since that report, the number of law enforcement agencies who have started working with Ring has increased by 50%. It's almost like talking about it made people realize, oh, hey, or by people, I mean law enforcement agencies realize, oh, hey, we can get, some footage. This is great. In two responses from Amazon's vice president, they said that the company said it placed few restrictions on how police use or share the videos offered up by homeowners, which I guess kind of makes sense, because obviously if it's offered by the homeowner, then Amazon, or I should say Ring, which is owned by Amazon, is simply the conduit between law enforcement and the homeowner. But still, there should be some kind of personal data protection that you would think that, they would say, okay, we'll give this to law enforcement, they'll have access to it for 30 days, and then we'll make sure that it's deleted so that your privacy remains intact. But no, Amazon is willing to just pretty much wholesale give the information away. So, police in those communities can use Ring software to request up to 12 hours of video for anyone within half a square mile of a suspected crime scene, covering up to a 45-day time span. Police are required to include a case number for the crime they are investigating, but not any other details or evidence related to the crime or their request, because obviously, like we said, time is of the essence. They don't want this to be too laborious. Markey said in a statement that Ring's policies show that the company has failed to enact basic safeguards to protect American privacy, saying that, quote, connected doorbells are well on their way to becoming a mainstay in the American household, and that the lack of privacy and civil rights protections for innocent residents is nothing short of chilling. Now, why he would say that? Well, actually, let's just go ahead and continue the quote, saying that, quote, if you're an adult walking your dog or a child playing on the sidewalk, you shouldn't have to worry that Ring's products are amassing footage of you, and that law enforcement may hold that footage indefinitely or share that footage with any third parties who ask for it. Which is true. And so far, we can only assume law enforcement in general is not working with advertising agencies or anything like that. But I think the problem that the senator has with this, and I really do think it's a valid concern, is that they didn't put any time restrictions on how long they can keep people's video footage. I get that it's related to a crime, and I get that, maybe it needs to work its way through the courts for X amount of months, X amount of years, so on and so forth, and they need to have that handy. But at the same time, if you give the police force indefinite and almost unfettered access to people's Ring doorbells, and like they said, it's within a very confined space, but when what kind of crime would you consider? Would a video of someone jaywalking consider a crime? And then you're able to, within 45 days of anywhere, within half a quarter mile, and you just, kind of find a crime every quarter mile or half a quarter mile to justify why you're keeping everyone's video footage. You could look at things like the National Security Agency, the NSA, who was logging cell phone metadata for every American in the country for years and years and years. And so, of course, Edward Snowden, kind of blew the whistle on that, and then they continued to do it. Only recently have we found out that the NSA actually lost their contract, but it's probably more because they couldn't handle the amount of data that they were amassing more than, they had some kind of turn of heart, or the ethics of it all got to them. No, it was, again, kind of a lack of I was about to say a lack of possibility, but it's more of a lack of management of data. And even if they can't handle it right, they probably shouldn't have it at all. So law enforcement being able to keep this indefinitely seems very, very suspicious. So a spokeswoman for Ring's neighbors social network said in a statement that Ring users place their trust in us to help protect their homes and communities, and we take that very seriously. She added, does not own or otherwise control users' videos, and we intentionally designed the neighbors portal to ensure that users get to decide whether to voluntarily provide their videos to police. There you go. So reading up a bit more, and I don't want to go through every little, minutia of this, but let's go ahead and get to some numbers saying that Ring's police partnerships have exploded across the country, from the local police department in Seward, Alaska, that's right, all the way in Alaska, to the sheriff's office in Key West, Florida. Roughly 630 law enforcement agencies can now request homeowners' videos through Ring, with 200 agencies that joined up within the past 3 months. So 200 within the last 3 months. Man, this is really getting on their radar. So obviously Ring has invested heavily in marketing itself as a high-tech safety company for the American neighborhood, and it has become an unmistakable signature of its holiday advertising campaign. So this month, the company said that Ring Doorbell has been pressed 15.8 million times on Halloween. There you go. Up 8.3 million times from last year. The peak time in Houston was 7 p.m. with more than 300,000 rings. How many of those trick-or-treaters had their image captured by Ring Doorbell is unknown. And that's the thing, is that what they're saying there with those numbers is that, one, there's a lot of Ring doorbells out there. 15.8 million times on Halloween. Of course, trick-or-treaters, and of course, one Ring doorbell is going to get multiple presses in a night. But think about the amount of data that they just kind of shared with that they know how many times the doorbell is pressed. They can, of course, every time it's activated or even not pressed, if there's any kind of motion detection, depending on your settings, it would record that video. And if that video, let's say, who knows? So let's say trespassing or vandalism crime happened in a neighborhood, every one of those, let's say in Houston, 300,000 videos of just everyday people and their children doing normal activities are suddenly cataloged and archived and kept indefinitely. I'm not against law enforcement having access to these video where people want to share the video and they think it's appropriate. I do find it very weird that they don't put any time restriction on them. We've seen law enforcement in so many other cases, so many other pieces of evidence, they just don't handle evidence with all that much care. And I don't know, just to let them keep it indefinitely just really rubs me the wrong way. So there you go, Ring Doorbell. Be careful. I still think that they do a fantastic job. I mean, they're one of the most well known in the market. There are many other providers out there that don't make this deal. I think it's just the fact that it's part of Amazon and it's one of the biggest companies out there. Then of course law enforcement is going to be much more interested in that ecosystem. But you can be sure they're also interested in others. It's just they're not going to, all these police forces aren't going to waste their time trying to trying to integrate themselves with every single smart doorbell provider out there. So just know that's what you're getting into when it comes to Ring. And like they said, of course, for now, you can deny access to law enforcement. So there you go. Let's go ahead and talk about something a little bit less techy and a little bit more science-y. This has to do with NASA, and for astronauts. I know all of you out there are going to be future astronauts, and I applaud you. But for those who are going to be in space for long durations or extended period of times, you need to know about a possible danger. And this is something I had never heard of, probably because, hey, they just found it. Saying that an unexpected discovery has major implications for long-duration space missions, including, of course, trips to Mars. And this is by Ms. Denise Chow for NBC News, saying that spaceflight can halt and even reverse blood flow in astronauts' upper bodies. And that's what they reported on Wednesday, saying that a startling discovery that has important implications for future trips to Mars. NASA has known for decades that spaceflight is rough on the body and that spending lengthy periods of time in orbit unburdened by gravity can cause astronauts' muscles to lose mass and their bones to become more brittle. Yes, that's why you always see astronauts working out, because they have to work out like multiple hours a day just so that they can get just so that they can retain, like even with all the working out that they do on a daily basis, they can retain most of their muscle mass. They are still going to lose some, guaranteed. So in a new study published Wednesday in JAMA, J-A-M-A Network Open, saying that researchers examined 11 healthy astronauts who stayed aboard the International Space Station for an average of 6 months. And during routine ultrasound assessments by the 50th day of their mission, 7 crew members were found to have stagnant or reverse blood flow in their internal jugular vein. I don't know what a reverse blood flow does, but it doesn't sound good. Saying that a major blood vessel that runs down the side of the neck and is responsible for draining blood for the brain, face, and neck. There you go. So one astronaut was also found to have developed a clot in the internal jugular inside the internal jugular vein during spaceflight, and a partial clot was discovered in another crew member after returning to Earth, according to the study. Good thing that they're running tests on these guys, because that's those are good things to catch early. So they said that the discovery is not necessarily a death knell for long duration space travel. They said that they would eventually lead to the development of treatments and interventions to treat health risks. And of course, it's much like, kind of like they said about the bones, kind of like they said about the muscle. They also have things like sleep that can cause its own problems if you don't have a steady supply of air. I've actually heard, and I'm sure this is probably just partially true, but if you don't have a fan blowing on you while you sleep in the International Space Station, then that it's so stagnant and gravity has no effect and there's no airflow whatsoever that astronauts could actually suffocate, because they surround their own head in a cloud of carbon, CO2 is what we expel, I think, right? Yeah, carbon dioxide. They actually surround their own head in a cloud of carbon dioxide, and they cause themselves to suffocate in their sleep. And of course, the solution to that is a fan, blowing on them when they sleep. Little things like that. It doesn't mean that you have to stop sleeping in space. It just means that you have to have the proper procedures in place so that it's no longer a problem. They said, and so quoting some of these other ones, they had a senior author for the Cardiovascular and Vision Laboratory at NASA saying that, quote, "We did not expect to see stasis and reverse flow. That's very abnormal. On Earth, you would immediately suspect a massive blockage or a tumor or something like that. Obviously, if the blood can't flow down the jugular, that means that jugular is obviously blocked. But to see it reverse flow or just kind of stand still, that has to do with zero gravity." So they said it's potentially a serious problem, and obviously they're saying that if you get a clot in the jugular vein, the clot could travel to the lungs and cause a pulmonary embolism, and that's very dangerous. So yeah, they're going to be working on it. So the article is a bit longer. We'll include it in the show notes. I think we'll go ahead and leave it there. One last quote saying, this is from one of the astronauts there, saying, "It's humbling. After 50 years of human spaceflight, we may think we know everything, but it turns out that nature has a way of surprising us." And I think that's the interesting thing, is that even after all this time, even after how many people have gone up into space and come back down safely and live, we're still learning, what some of the problems could be. And hey, I'm hoping that at least in my lifetime, we do see that mission, that famed mission to Mars. And we know it's going to be risky, but hey, it's NASA. They're going to minimize as many risks as they possibly can. And one of those is going to be how to minimize blood clots in long distance space flights. So very interesting indeed. Let's go ahead and continue on. Some of these other ones are very, very heavy and, okay. How about we talk about, okay, how about we go ahead and talk about Microsoft. And honestly, I was never really into Outlook. I guess when Outlook kind of hit its peak in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, I just didn't use email all that often. Like, I know so many people that are just diehard Outlook fans. It must have been amazing in Windows 95 or Windows 2000 or Windows XP. It must have been the bee's knees to have Windows Outlook. But my first email that I really had to care about was like Yahoo Mail, and I barely cared about that. And then when Gmail came out, it was the cool, sexy new email provider on the block, and Gmail was kind of my first real email provider. So I saw this story and I thought, hey, this is going to be good. Microsoft seems to be testing a new feature that lets users add Google services to their Outlook account. And this was revealed by a Twitter user and reported to The Verge. That's right, Twitter users, you ruin all the surprises. But that's okay. So this is coming to us from Engadget. And they're saying that if available on your account, you should see a pop-up that says add your Google Mail and calendar to Outlook and easily manage everything in one place. Doing so allows you to switch between Outlook and Gmail inboxes and browse your Drive files. It's not clear how Google Calendar is integrated into Outlook. I'm betting all of the dates and essentially all the events are just swapped over. But who knows? At the moment, you can only select a single Gmail account to sync with the Outlook, which can be frustrating since so many people use multiple Gmail addresses. This isn't the first time that the two competitors have joined forces. Back in 2017, Google Calendar and Contacts functions, Microsoft added Google Calendar and Contacts functions to its desktop-based version of Outlook 2016. But of course, I think a little while ago, Microsoft said that they will no longer be supporting anything other than Office 365. We kind of saw this coming. If they were going to continue the integration, it had to be with their continuously updated cloud versions. So if you are still a diehard Outlook fan, hey, maybe you'd be able to integrate to some extent Gmail and Outlook if you happen to use both of those email accounts. There you go. So let's see. So let's go ahead and say, hey, that's definitely a good thing. Verizon, the phone company, the ones who are bragging about the ones who are bragging about having 5G everywhere. 5G coverage is the new hottest topic for these, saying that it's the new thing. It's so much more faster. I've been hearing things like, 25 times faster, so you can be more productive, you can stream more stuff, you could upload more things, you could consume more data, blah, 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 blah. But let's just go ahead and see how good their coverage actually is. So Verizon's 5G coverage maps are here, and they're sparse. This is coming to us from Engadget once again, saying that more than anything, the maps show that they're saying that more than anything, the map shows that the current limitations of wave deployments. So they said that 7 months after it first launched its 5G network in the US, Verizon, Engadget's parent company, so they had to say that, you know, their parent company is the one being talked about in the article, has shared coverage maps for all 18 cities in which it currently offers next-gen wireless connections. And if you're watching the video portion, they have some examples here, or at least they have one example here. And it's about what I expected. I mean, these things are particularly atrocious. They just... So let's go ahead and show you the image. It follows a street down, and this is a map of Subic Falls. There we go. And they said that it's fair to describe the Verizon deployment as modest at best. It shows just a couple of streets, and it's kind of webbing out from there. And any kind of coverage that you would see in buildings or anything like that, it's only along the main road and along, you know, kind of streets branching out from that. But overall, there are a lot of gaps, even within their current 4G LTE coverage. It's just not good. It's just not very viable when you look at how many spaces are actually covered, and you're talking about like intersections at this point. You're not even talking about entire blocks. You're not talking about zip codes. You're not talking about you know, entire apartment buildings. You are talking about building by building, intersection by intersection, and that is what we kind of expected for 5G. It's not like they're going to flip a switch, replace a bunch of towers, and you're going to be good to go. No, 5G ultra wideband, as they're calling it, is going to be a massive deployment. Think about how long it took us to go from 4G to 4G LTE, or even 3G to 4G. That took like 2 or 3 years, and this is going to take 5 to 6 times as many antennas to get the same kind of coverage in the same amount of space. If anything, you know, if you kind of count, you know, how many, you know, let's say it took 2 years to put out 4G, and it's going to take 5 or 6 times as much. If they don't up development, if they don't up the, you know, the amount of people out there installing these antennas, you could be looking at over a decade before even the majority get themselves 5G, let alone, you know, currently there are places in a lot of cities out there that don't even have 4G, that still don't even have 4G. 3G is still the backup in so many places. It's going to take them decades, really, honestly, decades before they get 5G out to where you currently only have 3G. So the solution to that, there are a couple of solutions, and yes, these cell phone companies will sell you actual 5G antennas that you can install in your home if you spend so much time at home and so much data at home that you feel like that's a good investment for you. You can actually go out and buy, you know, a separate data plan and buy your own 5G antenna to provide 5G for your devices. Which, again, completely not necessary. Only a handful of devices actually support 5G, so don't feel the need to do that. And of course, we still have Wi-Fi, but it is going to be a good thing when it finally gets here, and again, if it ever gets here. So they said that outside of the downtown cores of dense cities like Chicago and New York, there's not much to see at the moment. Saying that the maps are different than the ones we're used to seeing from the past. Wireless technologies, a lot of that has to do with the natures of 5G build out. At the moment, the carrier is exclusively using a type of spectrum called millimeter wave, in contrast to sub 6 gigahertz. The other major frequencies network operators plan to leverage for 5G. They say that it oscillates so quickly that they tend to scatter against walls that may be in their way. And that's the problem. They don't penetrate walls. So if you're not out in the open, if you're not on the street, if you're not sitting outside, this has little to no effect on you. And imagine a city, and especially a crowded downtown, yeah, there's going to be walls, or even, let's face it, trees are going to be there. They also can't travel very far, saying that the range is limited to about an 800-foot maximum radius from the cell site. And even then, given a building, a tree, anything like that, you're going to get a lot of disruption, and I wouldn't even count the 800 foot as the maximum. So with that being said, millimeter wave promises extremely fast speeds, and when Verizon launched 5G in Chicago, they were able to test it for themselves, and they were able to get up to 600 megabits per second, which you can see here in the video. It's cool. Let me put this another way. I recall a story probably about a year or two ago. Scientists in a laboratory, fun things always happen there. Scientists in a laboratory were able to beam data through lasers or everyday lighting. Think like fluorescent lighting or the like. They were able to beam data through light, given a direct source. Obviously, the amount of data that they were able to pass through, especially with the lasers, and they were able to, even better than fiber optics, but they were able to beam data much, much faster. They were able to pulse the lasers in a certain way that they could embed multiple embed multiple data streams into each laser. They're able to get up to like a terabyte a second. I mean, some of the fastest speeds that we've ever seen. The problem, though, is that it's using light waves as a way to convey data. And if you put your hand in front of it, there you go. All your data, all of that speed, all of that throughput is immediately shut off. It's the same way here. Like, they're bragging about getting, 100 megabits per second or 1 gigabit up and down through, through wireless signal, through 5G. And that's great and all, but we have stuff that's like 100 times faster than that. It just doesn't leave the lab because it's not ready for prime time. There's no way to guarantee those kinds of speeds in a live environment. And I'm afraid that's what we're heading into with 5G. There's a lot of hype around it. There's a lot of marketing around it. And that's another problem. The marketers have taken this idea of 5G much further than it needed to go. But the marketers have taken 5G, and I'm still not wholly convinced that 5G is ready for deployment. But they're promising it, and if you recall any of the stories about, let's say, the Sprint T-Mobile merger, they said that through 5G deployment in their merger, they're going to be able to do this much more effectively. I don't think anyone's going to be able to do this eventually, is going to be able to do this in any meaningful way. So the article caps off by saying Verizon sharing these maps is an important step to trying to convince people that there's more to its 5G built right tagline than marketing hype and wishful thinking. I think it's marketing hype and wishful thinking. But the carrier has been constantly criticized by its competitors for not being more transparent about the extent of 5G. And T-Mobile, for instance, launched a marketing campaign called Verizon, where instead of Verizon, it's hide, as in, don't look at me kind of thing. Verizon, that specifically called out the missing coverage maps. If you live in one of the 18 cities where Verizon offers 5G, you'll definitely want to check out the maps. More than anything, though, they'll show that the technology has a long way to go. Which is why I find it crazy that they're promising so much 5G in the next year or so. Unless they mess with the numbers to some degree, if they mess with the numbers where they're going to count if a portion of a neighborhood is covered, let's say a street corner is covered, then they're going to count that entire block as covered by 5G. Then I could see, they're going to essentially lie their way to the top. But if you're going with a blanket, here's our square footage that we have covered by 5G, it's just going to take forever. It's going to take forever. So don't feel the need to rush out there and buy 5G. If you buy a 5G device, just know you're buying it to future-proof yourself. For the foreseeable future, even then, you are going to be using 4G. So we'll see. I would love to be proved wrong. It's one of those things where I'm going to say something outlandish and then say, "Well, prove me wrong." But yeah, it's that's exactly what it is. So I know that we talked a bit about Amazon earlier, but I really want this one to make it in here as well, because it's a different way to shop. And if it catches on, you know for a fact, if the technology is precise enough and they're opening these stores, I think that Amazon is a little bit better than Google at opening these weird branching offshoots of its company. Because Google will do it as kind of like a proof of concept, and then they'll sell that part of the company off to another company, or they'll spin it off into its completely own company. Amazon's a little bit better because they actually stay invested in markets that they kind of dabble in. But Amazon may open checkout-free supermarkets early next year. That's right, saying that they will bring its Amazon Go tech to larger stores. There have been plenty of rumors about Amazon plans to shake up the grocery store industry with cashierless stores. Job loss. It's coming. Saying that the latest is that Amazon plans to launch checkout-free supermarkets in the first quarter of 2020, and that the company may also license its Amazon Go cashierless tech to other retailers. And really, that's what you would expect from Google, is that they would open these little stores that don't have any cashiers. Really, they would just have security. Yeah, they wouldn't have any cashiers, and they would then try to entice the likes of Walmart or any other supermarket that has cashiers, and they would try to entice them to rent, lease, purchase their technology. They're saying that in early 2018, this is the first time that they kind of introduced the idea of checkout-free stores. It said that it could open as many as 3,000 cashierless Amazon Go stores by 2021. And so far, most have been smaller convenience stores. If you've ever seen them, they're mostly for kind of like sandwiches or drinks, or just little. Think of things like you would find at like a gas station. That's what you would find in these stores. But people have speculated that it's only a matter of time before Amazon brings the cashierless checkout to large supermarkets, and it's unclear how exactly Amazon will make that model work with many of the items in the grocery store that need to be weighed before purchase. Yeah, obviously one of the first things would be just, hey, sort them into packaging that would be pre-weighed, and you just have to scan it. And so with that being said, Amazon confirmed that its engineers are testing GoTech at 10,400 square foot retail space in Seattle. So the other problem with that is you would have to, of course, sign up for that. That's okay for these little kiosks because, hey, there's not a lot of risk to a, let's just say like a 600 square foot convenience store going under. Yeah, not a lot of loss of revenue there. But when you're talking about entire, let's say entire Walmarts or entire Publixes, because, hey, East Coast, go West, or entire, insert your favorite grocery store here, that's a lot more jobs and people and inventory and so on and so forth. Every single customer who hopes to go cashierless would have to, in some manner, be able to register themselves, take scans of themselves, open an account with these places, and have a debit or credit card associated with the account so that it can all work smoothly. And right now, that is very much not the business model of grocery stores, where you just walk in, pick something up, go to the cashier, pay for it through a debit card, a cash, or whatever, and then walk out. There's no, there's no setting up an account. There's no, registering your face. There's nothing like that. So will it work? Who knows? One of the big tipping points is going to be the accuracy. If people if it reduces theft down to zero, because anyone who walks in there has to have kind of like a credit card on file, and if they try to steal something, then hey, it just gets charged to their account. If theft goes down, you can almost guarantee that more and more places are going to want to do this. It's just a matter of, how are they going to convince everyone to, let them have their face, essentially let them have their faces? That I have absolutely no idea. So with that being said, everyone, let's, we have time for about 2-3 more stories. How about we go ahead and continue on with some of these stories? Okay. Okay. How about we talk about the IRS? So many times on the show here, we have discussed keeping our identities safe and having the ability to monitor your credit and, really out of season IRS impersonating phishing attacks. This is one of the big ways that people were concerned that all of the data breaches that we've been talking about for the past couple of years, this is how it's going to come to fruition, is that your social security number, your place of work, everything that they stole from Equifax, from 146 million Americans, and so on and so forth, all of that will be used to essentially do IRS impersonate you with the IRS, so that they would give you all of your personal information, and then you would have to sign over just that little bit more, and they would then have you in their sites. So the problem, researchers see a spike in out-of-season IRS impersonating phishing attacks. This one is from Ars Technica, and tax return scammers usually strike early in the year, obviously before tax season when people start to get everything together. So they said that members of a threat research team found a recent surge in off-season phishing attacks, masquerading as notices from the Internal Revenue Services, targeting over 100,000 individuals, saying that the attacks used at least 289 different domains hosting fake IRS websites, and trust me, they're pretty good. They're decent. I've seen some of these fakes, and you would be hard pressed, especially if you're not really expecting it, you'd be hard pressed to tell that it's not the authentic IRS login. Saying that the majority of them legitimate sites that had been compromised. The wave of attacks came as the October 15th deadline for people who have filed for extensions approached. There you go. So according to a post by the security researcher, the phishing campaigns kicked off in the second half of August, with the majority of victims targeted between August 22nd and September 5th. But the campaigns continued to be launched into early October. Each of the fake websites use visually identical HTML pages with randomly generated style tags and other content in an attempt to throw off signature detection by security software. So what signature detection is that, let's say you had a snippet of the HTML that they use to format the fake sites. Well, all a security researcher would have to do is that, let's say they named one of the elements, they named it ABCD1234. And of course it would be, a little bit longer than that so that you wouldn't get as many false positives, and it'd be a lot more complicated than that. But they'd be able to take just a small snippet of the code and say any other website that is currently running that little snippet, block it, delete it, lock it down. That's a threat that is, essentially a copy and paste of this illegal code that we know is used, and no one else is using it other than these criminals. So they're changing things to, I guess, kind of generate style tags and other content, just so that you don't get that one particular snippet that can be found across these, these hundreds of websites that they were able to compromise. So most of the domains were active for fewer than 20 days. However, a significant number of them remained active after a month, undetected by the owners of the sites, saying that the lack of maintenance on legacy websites, as well as the challenges of patching and removing injected content, explains the duration over which phishing pages can remain active. I guess what they're saying there is that if you own a website and you haven't checked out in a while, and even though you think no one is going to it, other people might be changing how your website looks and where it sends people and things like that, so that obviously, phishing website 123 at Russia is going to be blocked. But if you have legacycomputeramerica.com, that's not going to be blocked by the majority of these services. And that's exactly what they want. They want to be undetectable and they want to be unblocked so that they can hook as many people as possible. So with these sorts of scams propagating all year, it's worth reminding friends and family that the IRS will not email you or call you about overdue taxes. They will only do things by mail and only certified mail. So keep that in mind and be sure to tell, anyone who you may think is or at risk for mentioning these kinds of things, or at least for falling for these kinds of things. Let's go ahead and talk about. No, I don't want to talk about Tim Cook or Mark Zuckerberg. I don't know, something about them. Just yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about. No. Okay. Google. You know them. Google outlines plans for mainline Linux kernel support in Android. And this is interesting, first of all, because tomorrow, Thursday, I think it's like our third Thursday every month, assuming everything works out with Marcel Gagné. Marcel Gagné will be here talking about all Linux, and hey, it's going to be a fun time. So I thought this would be kind of like a nice little intro to it, but Google outlines plans for mainline Linux kernel support in Android, which is amazing. It means that a lot of the support working, or a lot of the people supporting the main Linux kernel, regardless of distribution, that's going to directly benefit the Android Linux kernel as well. Google wants less forking, more modularization for Android's Linux kernel. There you go. And they have a couple of they have a couple of images here trying to explain what they're talking about. Very, very informative. But it seems like Google is working hard to update and upstream the Linux kernel that sits at the heart of every Android phone. The company was a big participant in this year's Linux Plumbers Conference, a yearly meeting of the top Linux developers, and Google spent a lot of time talking about getting Android to work with generic Linux kernel instead of the highly customized version it uses now. Obviously, it even showed an Android phone running a mainline Linux kernel. And my immediate reaction is this idea that the less forking that Google has to deal with, it means that they don't have to spend the time updating these things and spending the man hours to kind of work with this. But if you wanted a singular Android operating system to go across, let's say, anything from Qualcomm, anything from Samsung, anything for its own Pixel line of phone, any device, any edition, things like that, the more they can move those, I guess, kind of further down the list for these devices, then you don't have to worry about updating tablets versus smartphones versus this version of phone versus this version of phone from this carrier, so on and so forth. You can just update all the phones at once and then worry about the superficial stuff kind of down the road. That is the dream of Linux, that it just kind of works across any machine that you want. If you want to customize it to exactly what you want, if Samsung wants to customize their version of Android to be almost exclusively Android, but at the same time still easy enough for Google to work with, that's going to be a huge boost in productivity and, of course, in security. Saying that some of the background on Android's kernel, Android's current kernel is a mess. Currently, 3 major forks happen in between the mainline Linux kernel and a shipping Android device. Saying that Google takes the long-term support Linux kernel and turns it into an Android common kernel, and then that kernel with all of the Android OS specific patches applied, then it's shipped to SoC vendors, which is system on a chip vendor, usually Qualcomm, where it gets the first round of hardware specific additions, first focusing on particular model of system on chip. So that becomes the new SoC kernel, then gets sent to a device manufacturer for even more hardware-specific code that supports every other piece of hardware like display, camera, speakers, USB hub, and any extra hardware. This is then the device kernel. So you went from everything from the long-term support, the stable long-term support, which is the basic kernel by Linux, and then you have Android, which is produced by Google, and then you have on top of that the SoC, and then on top of that the device kernel. Each one of those needs its own set of fixes, and I guess they want to move that a bit further down the line so that everything just works, and then any kind of tweaking that you want to do after the fact, you don't have to wait for 4 other organizations to support a device so that you can just run Android. No, it just runs kind of right out of the box. So last year at the Linux Plumbers Conference 2018, Google announced its initial investigation into bringing the Android kernel closer to mainline Linux. This year, it shared a bit more detail on its progress so far, but it's definitely still a work in progress. They said that today we don't know what it takes to be added to the kernel to run on a specific Android device. We know what it takes to run Android, but not necessarily on any given hardware. So our goal is to basically find out all of that and then upstream it and try to be as close to mainline as possible. And why is this good? It's because, first of all, for security updates, if Google puts out a security patch, but then any one of those providers that before would have had to make sure that the patch works with all of their devices, if it doesn't work, then one of these service providers would have just straight up not sent out the security patch to so many other devices. The less hurdles you put in place, the safer everyone is, and of course, the less you kind of have to, and by they, I mean Google, the less Google has to support 14 different distributions across 14 different devices. No, they just want the singular one. So the Linux community has been against the idea of stable interfaces for some time. What are you gonna do? With the suggestion that if you want the ability to quickly update a kernel, open source your drivers and give them in the main kernel tree where any changes will be taken care of for you. So yeah, the Linux community wants everything open source and wants everything out in the open. I can get behind that. I definitely like that idea. Open sourcing drivers is an absolute deal breaker for many hardware companies, and no amount of advocacy or product degradation is going to change that. The fact that Google is stuck supporting 5-year-old versions of Linux shows that the model isn't working. Yeah, that's a real sticking point for the Linux community. They really enjoy the fact that, well, not even enjoy, they really hold it dear that if you want to utilize Linux, and don't get me wrong, if you want to take any kind of work that's been done and you want to kind of patent it and, kind of make it yours and sell it, you're free to do so. That's elements of a free market. But they would rather you have it open source. Anyone can contribute, and any work that you do can then leapfrog any work that they do. So with that being said, for now, Google is only proposing that the in-kernel ABI be stable for a single long-term support version. So this wouldn't allow devices to be upgraded from one version of Linux to the other. It would just allow for a single generalized kernel image to work across multiple devices instead of the device-specific kernel forks we have today. So essentially, if you're running Android version 2, then Android version 2 will work across any of the devices out there. And it's just going to work. They said that we have miles to go, and we know that, but we've come a long way from where we started. Last year, I talked it into existence. This time, we actually have problems to discuss. That was what they said essentially this year. So everyone, music should be playing oh so softly in the background. That should be about it for Computer America. And I want to thank you so much for tuning into the show. Obviously, a full hour of computer and technology news. If you missed it, check us out wherever podcasts are heard. I have happy news to announce that Computer America is now officially on Deezer. That's right, Deezer is one of the largest podcasting platforms in Europe. maybe why you might not have heard of them, but we're very happy for our European fans that, hey, we are trying to get Computer America anywhere that you're listening. We want Computer America to be there very, very easy. So everyone check that out, Computer America, available on Deezer. And everyone, until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.